Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. Okay, so I was finally able to get my hands on the original Osborne 940. I picked up the 940-2. It would have been the third or fourth high quality folder that I ever purchased. This comes in around 220 Canadian, maybe about 230 for the original 940. This is one of the weird knives where the sequel actually costs a little bit less. So the 940-2 I think is about 220 Canadian, or somewhere is around like 190 or 200 American, and then about 10 bucks or so more for this version, which is pretty damn close to the same thing. The major differences you're going to see is the full back spacer, this big bright purple like a nice Barney purple, isn't it? I don't know what else to reference that to, but magenta perhaps. But this is covering the entire back of the knife, whereas the 940-2, as I'll put in a little picture on the side here, has a blow-through design with the, I guess, kind of like a lime green anodized back spacer. So a little bit easier to clean, but maybe a little less structurally sound. A little bit lighter, though. This definitely feels like it might have just a bit of weight on the 940-2. Which the 940-2 off the top of my head, I believe comes at like, it's 2.65 or 2.45 ounces, one of the two, but just around 2.5 ounces. This thing here, I'll check the specs, and again, I'll plug it up here at the top of the screen, but I believe is closer to 3 ounces. But other than the back spacer adding a little bit of weight and being one of the differences, you have the handle scales, which are aluminum. The 940-2 has G10 scales. They're textured and almost have the appearance of a carbon fiber scale, and they almost kind of do feel like a carbon fiber scale knife. But it is a G10, and it's extremely fine textured as opposed to something a little more coarse, like... Hey, what do I got here? Anyone recognize this bad boy? Not mine, by the way, but I'll touch on that in another video coming out here pretty soon. This is the Tanto Recon 1. I'm borrowing off a buddy. Actually, a separate one from the guy who lent me this 940-2. But both G10, mind you, not this one here, but the 940-2 is a G10. Much like what you have on the Cold Steel Recon 1 here, except this is a big, thick, fine, or a coarse textured one. And the 940-2 is barely even noticeable when you run your finger across it, or the texturing rather is barely noticeable. Actually, I think the 940-2's got a little bit more texturing than what this aluminum scaled one has, although it's the matte finish on it almost gives it a little bit more of a grip than the sleek G10. But yeah, so that aluminum green scale with the purple back spacer is pretty much your easiest first tell on how to tell if it's the original 940 model, because there is a few different ones. I did a full 940 review, which goes over all the different models, the automatic version and the fancy carbon fiber one, which I could see me getting a 940 again. I traded my 940-2 off for the Delica and, oh, it's here somewhere, the Griptilian, which is about to get mailed off for a trade. But these two, I traded for my 940-2, which I was pretty happy with because I wanted to try both these knives out and the different knife steels. And the 940-2 wasn't something I ever carried a ton. What this is a very good backup knife. At just 2.5 or 3 ounces, it's pretty easy to disappear in a pocket. Or for me, I was wearing my like work pants and throwing this into a cargo pocket and just using it for cutting steak or different things like that, when there wasn't always like a decent steak knife around, because I do eat a lot of steak. But for anything that I needed to cut with that I wasn't too worried about dulling the blade, the 940-2 was just there as a nice little backup knife that didn't need to be kept in as pristine condition as like my primary folders, which I typically try and keep a pretty good edge. Actually, this thing just cut a bunch of cardboard. Let's see how well that LC200N holds up. Oh yeah, super awesome. I cut a decent amount of cardboard with this actually, so pretty impressive. LC200N holding up with about the same edge retention as S30V or better. But yeah, point being, this thing wasn't always the primary knife I carried, mainly because of the size. However, still fully capable, and it's amazing for the size and the slimness of this knife, how much it still fills my hand out, and I was impressed with it from the first time I got it, because most knives this size, the Delica is a good example of what I've got here. I've got a bunch of other knives coming in the mail from home, and I'll have a few of my other smaller examples of knives that I really don't like or use to show you, but the Delica doesn't get a lot of pocket time because it's too damn small. The Benchmade 940 is the lower extreme of what I would like to carry and use as a folding knife. Still a bit small, but for the size of it, somehow the late great Warren Osborne, who designed this bad boy, Texas rancher from Australia. I always mix it up if he's an Australian rancher from Texas or a Texas rancher from Australia. But regardless, he made a knife that was a church carry that was able to work on a ranch, and it feels like it's probably going to live as long as me, because what's a good example of a bigger, badder knife that feels flimsier? How about the Griptilian, which I do have here? Griptilian's an awesome knife. Somehow, I think the Griptilian feels cheaper, and like it might break first over the 940, because this little tiny thing feels like a little pry bar in the hand. It's got, what, just about a 4-inch blade on it for a super tiny little knife, and that reverse tanto design you got going on there. Pretty thick blade stock, gets a little bit thinner in the middle and then thickens out towards the tip. Pretty sturdy, no issues with feeling like I'm going to break that tip or the blade. Maybe at this point here where it gets thin, if you were to snap the blade in half, that'd be the spot, but super unlikely. As far as the tip and the edge, pretty sturdy and a little more stout than some of the other Spydercos and different things I usually carry as a primary folder. I know when I'm sharpening this, it's not as, it doesn't take an edge quite as easy, and I had some issues at first getting used to the S30V on this and trying to get it hair popping. This thing still had its factory edge on it when it was given to me to touch up, so I did touch it up. I'm running out of arm hair here, but I think we've got, yeah, it's that hair popping scary right now, where if I press too hard on my skin, we're going to end up having to do a first aid lesson on video here, so trying to be careful. But yeah, when it's factory edge is pretty good. All it needs is a little bit light ceramic rods and then a little strop, and she's looking good. So Benchmade Osborne 940, original aluminum scaled. Wow, we got hair everywhere. Original aluminum scaled and purple back spacered version. Definitely glad I got my hands on it, and to feel the difference between this and the one that I have, I understand why a lot of people are a bigger fan still of the original 940. The 940-2 has its perks, but they're I mean, very similar knives, very much the same knife, but boy, there's a difference. I didn't even think I could have a comparison on the table here to give you, but there's one. Whoa, hello. I've got a Mora Kansbo here and a Mora Garberg. First glance, pretty damn similar knives. You can tell if you look at the blade stock, one's obviously a lot thicker, which doesn't really compare to the 940-2 situation, but very similar knives. But I'm telling you, they feel incredibly different in the hand. They cut differently, but they perform differently. I don't know about the cutting performance between the 940 and the 940-2, but I can tell you there is a notable difference. One that's kind of hard for me to qualify right now, but one of these days I'll get both of them in my hands. Maybe be able to do a little 940 versus 940-2 video and give you a full comparison if you're having an issue whether which one you're going to pick up. So cool, I'll finish this off with a few size comparisons, and then you can feel free to check out those 940-2 videos over on the Hub channel if you want some more info on the 940-2. But where's my Benchmades at? So we got that Griptilian here. Let's bring that out for probably one of the last video appearances it's going to have before it gets traded off. Pretty damn close to the same size, lengthwise, definitely not girth or height or anything like that. Stick the Super Freak down there below it, even bigger. Quite a bit bigger than the Osborne 940. Yep, so let's take those out. Throw a few well-known Spydercos in. The Paramilitary 2 should measure up pretty nice. Yeah, fairly comparable knives, but again, the 940-2 is pretty small compared to most of its competitors, around the same length and blade length. The Manix 2, a lot of cardboard through that guy lately. Pretty gummed up, but yeah, there's Spyderco Sandwich. Let's throw the Delicate in there again, as it is another small knife. Show you the Paramilitary 2 there with it. Yeah, so there's a nice little scale for you. Somewhere's in between the Paramilitary 2 and the Delica. If somebody ever asks me how big the 940-2 is or the 940, now I'm going to know. That's a good reference point. Cool. Last one, just in case anybody wants to see what it looks like next to. I've made this comparison before, but I haven't had a Recon 1 to show you since I've got the Code 4 from Cold Steel. But as you can see, they're very similar. If this was a Spear Point Recon 1, you'd see just how similar they are. But even so, yeah, the blade shape and the handle scale cutouts, overall the knives are basically like a kind of big brother, little brother version of each other. But very much skinnier too on the Code 4 compared to the Recon 1, which still isn't a huge thick knife compared to say the 8015 or some of the other Cold Steel monsters, or even the Super Freak. I bet you the Cold Steel, well, no, Cold Steel's pretty big, but the Super Freak is still thicker. But yeah, here is the 940-2 with two Cold Steels that it has no business being compared in size with. But there you have it. I lied, not the last one. Let's see. I always like seeing how the Azula 2 measures up as my favorite EDC fixed blade, and one that can replace a folder if you so choose. Yeah, that Azula 2 is so tiny. Even with the sheath, full length is a little bit shorter than the 940-2 when it's extended. But yeah, that is the 940. I probably called the 940-2 more than just once or twice without noticing. If I have, convert that in your head. I'm sure you'll be okay. That's it for this one. Check out those other 940 videos if you choose. There's also a comparison video between the 940-2 and the Manix 2, which is kind of fun, and another versus video that just got released sometime in the recent weeks here, whenever this video gets released, doing the, oh my goodness, what was the knife versus video of? It was the Manix 2 and the Griptilian. That's what it was. So yeah, lots of different ones to check out with these knives on the table, and all kinds of crazy fixed blades and different stuff. Feel free to do me a favor and click the like button down at the bottom left of the screen, and subscribe if you haven't, and all that stuff, and we'll see you on the next one. This is the Hard On Gear channel, signing off.